Welcome to Heartbeat, Tactical Insights for CIOs. Today, we're thrilled to introduce Brian Glass, the CIO for Transcend Company. With experience spanning from roles at Ally Financial, Volkswagen of America, and GM, Brian brings a blend of operational insight and software engineering expertise that's critical for leading modern, high-capacity enterprise systems. In this conversation, we'll explore how he keeps demanding business customers happy while guiding IT teams forward with real measurable success. If you're curious about the nuts and bolts of effective tech leadership, this episode's for you. So let's dive right in. Brian, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate being here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So Brian, let's look into a little bit of how you became a CIO. So tell us about your path on how you became a CIO. And did you always see yourself in this role, or was there a pivotal moment that set you on this trajectory?
I think I always knew I wanted to be in technology, even from the time of elementary school. I can remember clicking on IBM keyboards and programming the little turtle. And I was in elementary school in the 80s. And I always knew that I would be a technologist. I didn't know what form that would take. As I got older and I got into college, it was really funny. When I was getting my bachelor's degree, I can remember sitting in the advisory board saying, why am I not learning software development? I'm learning how to manage some of these things and what some of the technology is, but I'm not writing that much software. And they said, you know what? If you want, that's a vocational thing. Go to a community college and take COBOL and take C++. C++ was just coming out and was just managed at the time. And the reason I tell you that is I'm incredibly grateful that they forced me into thinking through maybe larger concepts rather than just how do I write and solve the problem of the day. I would say that more than anything served me to say, how do you retain a perspective outside of just the immediacy of the moment? But I turned a screwdriver for many years. I worked in computer shops when I was younger. My first big job in big IT was at GM as a data and interface architect, and just gradually worked my way into larger and larger roles. My work at Ally was with couple of their platforms that generated revenue that was measured in terms of thousands of dollars a minute, when you have to be oriented a certain way to be able to handle that. Transcend was a wonderful opportunity that came up for me that was maybe a reboot into things that I did when I was younger, where I have an ability to maybe turn the screwdriver again and really influence things. But the great part about Transcend is we're very interested in patient health and taking care of our patients in a meaningful way, and translating healthcare, which, let's be honest, is confusing for people, into something very meaningful. Being CIO of a company like that lets me showcase things that are important to me around servant leadership and taking care of people, whether they're clients or employees or other people, in a way that deeply resonates with me. No, I guess, Mike, I am still flabbergasted that I'm here and people want to take direction from me. And I believe deeply in servant leadership. And so I carry that burden very meaningfully.
Thank you for that. I've oftentimes heard people that want to get in technology focus so specifically on an area of specialization, whether it's a form of coding or it's getting into a pure developer role. Do you think it's helped you to become a better leader and a better CIO by maybe opening up your aperture of taking in different types of thinking and applying that to technology? Or do you think a CIO is better served coming from the ground up and then becoming more of a leader role that way?
Okay. I would say that the reason that I'm successful in what I do is because I have that multiplistic background. The days are not very predictable a lot of times. One day I'm dealing with cybersecurity issues. The next day I'm dealing with Salesforce development problems. The next day I'm dealing with how do I cultivate the right team and the right culture and train people up. In my experience, you can be the most gifted developer in the world and you're absolutely miserable at leading people. And you can be a wonderful, motivating people leader who has absolutely no idea what they're talking about from a technology perspective. So for me, it's all about balance. And that's what I try to bring to what I do. I think the best thing you can do as somebody that's trying to emerge into IT leadership roles is give yourself as broad of a base as you can. You need to do work in infrastructure. You need to do work in cyber. You need to do work In development, you need to understand the softer skills around maybe program delivery. All of that together is what makes a package that makes you a well-rounded leader.
Thank you for that. Was there ever an experience where you had an idea or your team was working on a project and it just went completely sideways or fell apart that ended up being one of your biggest lessons that you look to as a foundation of who you are and how you lead?
We can talk about some work that happened at Ally for me. I used to support a system called Smart Auction. Smart Auction was Ally's B2 auction platform. It's where used cars go when you're auctioning them off. You turn them in for leases and whatnot. Multi-million dollar replatforming effort that got to literally the final go, no go. And it was a no go. This was something like 18, 24 months worth of work and millions upon millions of dollars that the only thing we were able to salvage from that was the database servers.
Wow.
And yeah, not good. But out of the ashes came my philosophy on how I wanted to lead teams and how we could reboot that. That's when so I was on the team as a technologist, but not as a leader. And as we went into a new phase of that project is when we started really looking at it ourselves, the leadership team, myself, and said, we really need to do this differently. We hooked up with people that could help us with agile and agile delivery. We hooked up with people that focused maybe more on emotional intelligence and servant leadership. And we built the foundations of a team that still exists today and still is doing that work. And I always get a smile on my face when I see that the work that they created still exists and the people are still working there. Because to me, it's not just about building something that's cobbled together and duct taped together, but building something that's elegant and is fit for purpose and has durability. And that was the pivotal moment when a lot of that changed from maybe ideas that were up here into things that were actually real and tangible. And that's deeply motivating for me. I can remember fixing computers when I was younger or building computers when I was younger. And the only way I got good at building computers was building hundreds upon hundreds of them. And it's intensely gratifying to see 20 years later when people will talk to me, and I still know some people that bought stuff from me back in the day, and they say that thing was the best running machine or the longest lasting thing that I ever had. Some of them I still know where they are and they still work. Like to me as a technologist, that's the kind of impact that you want to have. You want to build things that last and are deeply meaningful for people.
I think it's so interesting that you had an experience where you were on a go, no go, and it didn't go maybe the way that you thought. And
Yep.
I feel too often we sometimes push things through or things get pushed through that shouldn't be because we've already invested too much money or we've already invested in these man hours.
Yep.
Let's just push it ahead. And if it fails, we'll fix it.
Hmm.
And I think it speaks a lot to the leadership to have that ability to stand behind a no-go decision, knowing that it's going to be painful, but it's the right thing to do. And I don't know
Right.
all the details of it, but if you think of the go no-go from launching a rocket, people can get severely impacted and people can die from it. Now,
Yep.
I don't think it had that same level of impact, but the thinking behind it of there's different ways of highlighting potential challenges and to get that decision making as early on as possible.
Yep. Yep.
And I heard a story about Toyota once where they had on the assembly line a big red button that anyone could at any point stop the assembly line. And it gave ownership and it gave the sense of being part of the decision making to everyone involved, and the quality went up.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering how
Absolutely.
much companies would change if they allowed individuals who were maybe not on the leadership levels, but more of the doers to have that voice and authority. Can you speak to how Transcend allows the individuals throughout your company to have a voice? And if they see something, do they have the opportunity to share? And how do you, as a leader, listen to your team?
That is so I agree with you, Mike. That's extremely impactful. I think it is easy to say and hard to do, right? Because like you said, there is a ton of pressure to say, hey, I've spent 100,000, 500,000, $1 million, $10 million on this, but it's not right. And one of the stories that I tell to my team and across the leadership team is about the Challenger disaster. And there was an engineer that worked on the Challenger. His name was Bob, if I remember correctly. and he worked for the contracting agency that built the rockets and said, this should not launch. You're nodding your head. I think you might know the story. He said, don't launch, right? There's going to be a problem. Don't launch. And ultimately, he was overruled. And it's unfortunately not a great story because it plagued him for the rest of his life. But my point of bringing that up is I want engineers like Bob. I want people working for me that have the courage to say this is not right and must be done. We're hiring and working for and trying to bring a concierge experience to our clients. And that requires care. That requires people to be passionate about what they do, not just check a box, not just worry about what's in a chatbot script. So we try to bring that same passion to what we build. And like I said, that's what I believe is very impactful in IT is you have to have that drive to build good things or you're constantly chasing the next disaster. I believe that comes from leadership. You have to make it safe for employees, clients to have that 360 feedback. We do that through stories like the Challenger. We do that through agile processes and adherence to things that allow for fast feedback. But most importantly, fail forward, right? And make sure that mistakes are okay. That is a difficult approach in enterprise, especially in large enterprises. And I think one of the best things that's happened to me is now that I'm working with maybe a more tactical team, we can do that and embrace it and say, look, like out of the ashes comes good things almost always, right? Whether that's you can't go and you need to redo it, like there's no penalty for that. And we try to make it where there's no penalty for failure. There's penalty for not delivering. Sometimes you're not delivering something that's not there. But one of the other things I think I do pretty well is you see a lot of IT delivery become just about the schedule, right? And the schedule becomes this near level of scripture, right? It says here's what you're supposed to do, and you become a slave to the schedule. And I don't think that a lot of delivery orgs really get it right. They build the schedule and it's now in concrete and you're agile in name, but not in practice. So we work very hard to blow up those barriers and really train our users as much as we train ourselves in what delivery actually looks like and what the right feedback mechanisms are.
I think that is so insightful. And this idea of failing forward, I believe, comes a lot from culture. So, how do
Mhm.
you set the culture for a company where you need to make sure everyone is okay to fail and that
Mhm.
it's not showcasing that you did something wrong. It's that we tried something, we experimented, we
Yeah.
are going to try again. And there's some individuals where they're just not thinking that failure is something that they want to do, so they will hold back innovation. How do
Mhm.
you balance when you're bringing on new team members, those who can complement the culture of failing forward, with also bringing in new ways of doing things and skill sets that you don't currently have?
So there is a difference between failing forward and just screwing up. There are some people that just need guardrails around what they do because they can't see that, right? I believe you cultivate a culture of failing forward by building in those guardrails that make it safe to fail. That includes things like feature flags. That includes things like a good CI/CD pipeline that lets you do incremental delivery and really like living those principles, right?
Mhm.
We talk about this all the time. One of the things is uh, put it out there in production and leave it off. Dark deploys. We have to educate people on what some of that stuff looks like. And there are a lot of tools now that really embrace this as a concept. So some of it is just keeping it fresh so everybody's aware of it. We try never to back out a deploy. We try always to turn the feature flags off if they're not working, if that makes any sense to you.
Sure.
Um, New people coming in, depending on the industry and how the level of penetration that those concepts have, is sometimes it's a very rocky road. In my experience now, and maybe a more Salesforce centric world that I'm in, it's a lot more common. And maybe that's just because Salesforce is on a very aggressive, release schedule. So they've carried their industry along with that. And plus, I think, they have a much different way of deploying software maybe than your typical Java developer would do. So patience is probably the word I want to use. Not everybody gets it right. And some people fail at failing forward. talk about failure very often. We talk more about opportunities. We try to run experiments and then turn those experiments into proof of concepts that then turn into releasable products and align a pipeline to that.
I think that's a very mature way of looking at it, and knowing there's a difference between how different technology needs to be deployed and the types of individuals that work on certain platforms. And you're
Mhm.
right, an individual who works on a platform like Salesforce fundamentally has to think differently because of how it's designed.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of best practices that exist on leveraging the best practices out of the box and moving your business practices to map to those business processes out of the box versus simply lifting and shifting what you've always done.
Absolutely. We struggle with that a lot, right? And how do we what level of customization is appropriate? And the other thing I was going to say too, Mike, is it's funny to talk about failing forward when you're in an industry with heavy regulation and you're in an industry where I've got to worry about HIPAA, I've got to worry about protecting people. You've got to it's like riding a bike. You can tilt too far one direction or the other and really screw up. Do I run the risk of violating our covenant with our clients on how we keep their data safe, or do I not release under the guise of being safe? And those are the types of attitudes that we're trying to blow up. With the right guardrails, you can be safe and still be safe. And you can release at a good cadence, but it requires sophistication and maturity and, having people that really understand those topics.
And I think what you're really saying is by having governance in place that allows you to have those safeguard rails, but to operate quickly, minimizing the downside and risk, but
Yep.
allowing for the speed and flexibility where it needs to be. I'm so glad that you have put that in place, as it's something that a lot of large companies will put in place, but it's more of a hindrance. And
Yes.
small companies don't have it at all because we just want to basically move forward and break things.
Yep. Yep.
But it's
I,
not
I
about.
think that's very dangerous to do. So I've got stories on both sides of it. I can remember getting a call from the CIO of GM back in the day on the biggest bar night of the year, the night before Thanksgiving, and having an incident that was a poor example of failing forward and having to speak very quickly. And then we have life-saving moments that we've done at other companies where, like we talked about, we pulled situations out of the gutters. It's all about balance. I think the thing to remember is you're not going to get it right all the time, and you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. That being said, we don't ever walk into a deployment scenario expecting that it's going to go poorly. Some of it is also understanding the right questions to ask that guide the team. And ultimately, it's really about giving them pride in what they're delivering. I want people to understand that we deeply value their craftsmanship and when they deliver things that they're proud of and that do what they're supposed to do, only good things come from that.
Thank you. I feel like the industry you're in is ripe for whether you want to call it digital transformation, you want to call it the emergence of what is it called? The information age. What's the next term they're using for AI? The intelligence age.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yep.
I'm running out of all these terms of vernacular that people are using. Do you feel there's a trend that you're aware of that may be flying under the radar that others are not really aware of?
We can't do a discussion without talking about AI, right? Because that's everything right now. I think healthcare is in a very confusing situation with how do you leverage this in a meaningful way and in a safe way that allows that to be really adding value and not just a shiny object that is the next great thing. And Transcend is deeply invested in AI, deeply invested in our technology platform. Our work that we're doing to transform this is turning this into our company operating system. We have a chief data and AI officer. We are deeply investing in it. I think it's not so much that there's something that's flying under the radar as people are lining up to do things maybe the wrong way or not thinking about these things in a way that says, how does this really benefit me versus this is cool. And I see that a lot. I can go anything I buy at this point has AI associated with it. And they do similar but not the same things. And there's no orchestration between what that looks like. And I think the reconciliation of all of that is going to be what we're all going to face soon. The outcomes of, okay, you're using these tools, you're making choices based on what a computer is telling you. I've seen great examples of how this can accelerate developers. I've seen terrifying examples of how you can use AI incorrectly in healthcare and really get yourself in trouble. It's being intelligent about how you reconcile that and use these tools for the right way versus just because they're there that I think we've got to pay more attention to.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not using AI for AI's sake, like putting AI in
Mhm.
refrigerator. It's
Right.
about having clear business goals and having a use case where AI is going to help enhance your business
Mhm.
objectives. And there's a clear set of this is why we're deploying it. This is the expectation, and that it's going to be something that will be improved upon. It's not a set it and forget it. Is that
Right. That's a great, yeah. There's AI tools that you can use to initiate chats with people that help offload some of that work. There's AI you can use to accelerate your developers. But when there's a hammer, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And right now the hammer is AI. And I believe there are just some things that aren't well suited for that and still need a human to do. So of course, I say that, and I've got young developers that are operating like mid-level developers because they are skilled at using AI. I can tell you when I was doing a lot of this, it was not AI, it was Google. If you knew how to do the right Google search, you were a masterful developer, right? And it's an inside joke, right? When you're in technology and when you're in support, you're just really one Google search ahead of who you're working on, and you got to be okay with that. And I think that's the way development is now. You're really just two questions to Chat GPT ahead of what people are asking you for. But I think what we're getting to is a world where we're not using our brains. If the first instinct is, I don't know, I need to go ask Chat GPT, you're not doing it right. Like you've got to say, what do I want? And then how does something like AI accelerate that? Not, hey, AI, tell me what I should do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to one of your first comments where you're sharing about your education and how you were trained to think about the
Mhm.
bigger problem and to look at more of the macro impacts and then to apply the technology understanding to that level of thinking versus coming in and saying, I know how to use AI and AI is going to solve everything.
Right.
Because if it ends up giving you a false result or if it ends up having any hallucinations, you have no way of double checking it.
Yep.
And
You have to know your domain. You can use AI to educate yourself about the domain, but at the end of the day, it's not ever going to replace a thinking human. It's going to make, and this is not just my philosophy, this is Transcend philosophy. We don't want AI solutions to replace humans. We don't want it to take the human out of healthcare. We want it to make our people more present, more precise, and more able to support our patients. And so that's how we've really aligned to that. Now, you can't, and not everything is ChatGPT. Not everything is a large language model that you need to solve. There are so many other tools that are out there. It's about putting tools in your toolbox, not setting those tools loose and hoping for the best.
would it be fair to say that AI should be used to amplify, not to replace?
100%. Yes. Like it should be making your people better. And in particular, in a concierge health environment, I wouldn't want to put solutions out there that were not vetted by a person. I don't think you would want to speak to an AI that's now making medical recommendations for you, which is not legal anyways, and then say, I guess that's what it is. We want to use AI to eliminate the drudgery that elevates humanity, not that replaces humanity.
I think that is so well said. The current team that you have, do you have an all on-site? Do you have a full remote? Do you have a hybrid? How are you guys?
Hybrid.
And
Yeah.
how do you encourage the best performance and the best outcomes from each individual as a CIO in charge of your department, where you
Mhm.
don't have physical oversight? How would you provide guidance to other CIOs who are going through the same challenge?
I think one of the most important things for me, one of my guiding principles is that connection, right? I love to connect with people. I love to connect with ideas. I think if you look at your resources as simply resources instead of people, you're going to get an assembly line mentality. And like we were talking about, that's not really what I'm interested in and what type of IT systems I want to build. So it's about it's the onus is on you as a leader to adapt to what your people need. And I believe very strongly in servant leadership. So You have to open your mouth and ask the questions. You have to be insightful and be thinking about, what do these people need? I have sent swag to Europe and India so that people could feel like they're more a part of the team. We've sent stickers. We have aligned people like softer skills like that, just to give people a baseline understanding. But I guess the thing that I believe the most, Mike, is it's on me as the leader to figure out what people need and connect with them. That's not, I can't sit back here and say, tell me what you're going to do for me. It has to be, show me what I can do for you. Sometimes I, I'm notorious for starting things and then handing it off to people to finish. And I'm very fortunate. I'm in a company that is both large enough and small enough to make that productive for me. So I'll give people something, and now we're connected, right? Because I have an emotional tie-in into what we're doing, and I can speak to a level to really get you interested in what we're doing, and we can celebrate those wins together. I'm not interested in faceless IT. That being said, it is extraordinarily difficult sometimes to have a connection with people that are remote versus, or work from home versus in person, is such a charged topic right now. And I don't have a great answer for it. I've notoriously said before, I don't care if you do your work in a McDonald's bathroom if it's the best work you can do. And one part of me believes that. Another part of me is truly gratified and enjoys connecting with people and being able to speak to them face to face. So each team's a little bit different, and you've got to have the flexibility and the leadership to adapt and keep your ethos and what you want out of that at the forefront, and be very vocal with, here's the way we do work. We Transcend has a strong support, has military background. We're a veteran owned company. We have a tradition of challenge coins that we use as an example. So when you're an IT, when you graduate from being a contractor to being an IT employee, one of the first things we do is give you a challenge coin. And whether you're remote or you're local, you're still going to get it. We believe very strongly in that identity. So I guess the punchline here is, you've got to have a strong sense of identity and who you are, and broadcast that in whatever way possible wherever people are working.
I think that is something that I'm not hearing too often in the market, which is setting expectations for your team and then letting them figure out the best way to deliver it.
Mhm.
And looking back to probably how you and I went to school, we were taught you need to sit in a room between these hours, you need to follow these steps. And for some people, it's a great method. It's how
Mhm.
they think, it's how they need to be focused, and they get the results they're looking for. And for others, it's a complete wrong model. And
Mhm.
I feel that with everyone was in an office and then COVID hit and everyone was remote, and now there's hybrid and there's a forced return for a lot of people to go back to an office. If the expectations are set right, if the culture is right, if the respect between leadership and the people doing the work is right, there's room for a lot of flexibility
Mhm.
to get the job done. But
Mhm.
if you bring on the wrong people, or if you are setting the wrong expectations, I think it can be an absolute disaster. And so, would
Yep.
you have any advice for other CIOs who are going through and really challenged with these questions of how do you find the right people to be part of your team, knowing that the world might shift significantly in 6 months?
What there's a Star Wars quote, and it's escaping me right now, but something about extremes being the dark side of the force, right? You have to be balanced in all of this. I will say, I don't hire for technical capacity first. I'm typically in an interview trying to see, is this person going to drive me crazy before, and I'm not going to be able to work with them, right? Because to me, we're going to solve those problems together, and I can train you in any number of technology as long as you have the right makeup. And at the end of the day, it's all about trust.
Hmm.
I trust you. And if you do your best work working in the office, hey, listen, we got drinks in the fridge, we have snacks on the kitchen counter. Help yourself and do your best work, right? If you do your best work remotely, that is unfortunately not an option that we offer as often anymore. But let's be honest, the talent for IT, and what I'm learning in particular with Salesforce is, it's not homogenous. You can't reach out and get people all the time. So sometimes you have to just adapt to what that is. But I believe the answer here is, hire people you want to work with, because when you get that resonance, then good things happen, and you don't worry so much about where they are. In some sense, no remote work is because I think we don't trust people. Maybe we don't know them well enough. Maybe we don't. And so we're trying to micromanage to manage our own sense of a lack of trust. And why not just work to trust people and find people you can trust and cultivate that type of relationship? That's what builds loyalty. That's what builds good IT, is people that can assemble together into a team that's greater than the sum of their parts. And I just don't worry about it. I've said no to people that are remote. I've said no to people that are local because we don't think they're a cultural fit, or we don't think that they're going to resonate with what we're able to do and how. And that doesn't mean that I need you to work 24/7, 365. I'm a dad. I have things I need to do, and I really want you to take your rest. And the way I say this to the team is, why don't you build systems that let you have that rest? Like, it's on all of us. And if you're building garbage, then yeah, we're all going to be sweeping garbage down the road at all hours of the day. Build things that are able to be supported and allow us to have the lifestyle that we want to live.
So you're creating some breathing room to allow some ownership for the individual, that if someone finds a better, more effective and efficient way to do something, that could actually be applied to everyone, and now everyone gets to be amplified.
Do it. Yeah, do it. Nothing is sacred. Great example. We built a CI/CD pipeline when I first came into Transcend that worked for me as a person that was used to Java development and was used to a certain way to do it, and it just doesn't work. So what do? Do we continue cutting our nose off to spite our face because that's the way that it needs to be? No, you have to have the humility to say, we need to revisit this and we need to improve this. Nothing is sacred. We say that all the time, and we have to challenge ourselves constantly to make sure that we continue to innovate as we go.
Coming from a more traditional IT background, like you said, you're turning screwdrivers, you're building things, you had a more
Mhm.
traditional CI/DC pipeline. What was the biggest shift or the biggest adjustment that you needed to make when moving into a world with Salesforce where they just do things fundamentally different? A developer is not a developer in the traditional sense. Can you speak to
Yeah,
that?
it is something that I still struggle with. I think I guess I don't struggle with it. What we had to accept and what I have to accept, and I think this goes for a lot of IT leaders, is stop trying to reinvent the wheel. I think Salesforce works best when you realize this is a company that makes billions and billions of dollars on selling you a platform, but also selling you a process. And you've got to be okay with adopting that out of the box process, or you invite yourself into such pain and frustration as you do it. Good example here from my GM days, we were on an SAP implementation that was supposed to reinvent their supply chain, right? And I was on that program for over a year. We traveled to something like 5 different countries to try to collect everybody's opinion on how this should be done. There was no alignment. And you had to take SAP, which is in some sense a lot like Salesforce in terms of, hey, you should probably just do this the way SAP thinks you should do it, and couldn't achieve it. So again, another situation where I think the final price tag was something like $900 million to make it happen, and you needed multiple Z series servers to handle the workload. Like, ludicrous, all because you couldn't get out of your own head for customization. That's been the hardest thing, and I think it's a hard thing for a lot of IT people. Is it's not less skillful to assemble things from modular components. It
Mhm.
is more skillful because now you can manage the aggregate system rather than having to deal with these fiddly things. And like, that's what I think Salesforce has really taught me, is put these together in a way, look at the overall process and transform there. It's more about business transformation than it is about technological transformation.
I feel like we're moving into a middle ground where it used to be you would buy software and it'd be almost a done for you model. You'd
Mhm,
sign up for a subscription, you'd buy software, and it would just work. And then we moved into a model whereby, because you can customize, everyone wants to customize and just simply repeat what they've always done in a new system. And I would
mhm,
call more of the done for you. So you'd hire consultants, you'd hire outside counsel, you'd bring in experts, and you would just
mm,
customize things to the nth degree. And if it broke, well, it would be cost you to fix, or you just lived with it and you end up building up a huge amount of technical debt.
Mhm.
Do you feel that there's a middle space, what I would call the systems as a service approach, whereby you're taking more of a done with you approach of leveraging those best practices and using more of a Lego block mentality where you're
Mhm.
building the system and you're able to test the pieces of the Lego blocks. And if
Yep.
the system as an overall model will stay consistent, but the pieces inside can be replaced as needed. Do you think that's a way of thinking that would be a benefit going forward? Or do you think there's still advantages on the done for you or do it yourself?
I can tell you this. I walked into multiple companies that said, "Hey, look at this amazing bespoke system that we have that perfectly captures what we do and how we do it." Or maybe it actually doesn't capture what we do and how we do. We're transforming it into this. And almost without exception, they're abject failures. They're difficult to support. They are antiquated. They are old before their time. You can get to, like you said, done for you. The alternate approach is I hire a consultant, they do something that's out of the box, and now I have no expertise to support it. So the balance here is I don't think there's any company that exists anymore where IT is not a central function. You have to balance how much IT you want to do in your company and understand the risks across both of those approaches. I love assembling things that just elegantly fit together and snap together. And I go, wow, look at this thing that we built. And it wasn't that hard. The prevailing thing that you hear from business all the time is you're not doing it fast enough. That the number one pressure that we get is why is this not done already? Why is this taking so long? The modular approach, the Legos that we're talking about, is the mechanism that lets this get done faster as long as you can transform the business process to support that. I think that's the balance that we all exist in now. The components that we're assembling are only getting better. Could you imagine trying to rebuild Salesforce and saying, no, I don't think it's a good CRM. I think maybe we should do this another way, or HubSpot if you're not a Salesforce fan, or whatever. Or you're gonna build a new inventory management system. Like, why would you do that? We talk all the time, don't reinvent the wheel. These things exist. And I think you kill yourself when you don't, as much as we want to move fast. The reason I tell you all this, as much as we want to move fast, you have to budget the time to make sure the domain that you're talking about and you can select from the appropriate set of Lego blocks. Do I want to build a car with wood? Probably not. If I don't understand that space and what tools are there, I might choose to do that. I don't want to build wrong things. So I think that, yes, we are moving towards a more modular IT ecosystem, but that doesn't mean that it's ever going to be done for you. It's still on you as a CIO and as a leader to understand the tools that are in the toolbox and help the team assist in how those are aligned and making sure you're choosing the right thing. Just like you don't want to put jet fuel in your car. It's not going to make it go faster.
That is very
It's going
true.
to make it,
Unless Elon
yeah,
Musk gets a hold of it and does
yeah,
something internal where it ends up being
yeah, yeah,
faster anyways.
yeah, exactly. So we should all get electric cars, right?
So let me
Yeah.
ask you this. One of the American dreams is to take an idea from a startup back of your garage and turn it into a multi-billion-dollar business.
Mhm.
And I feel that the technology, the way of thinking, the way of doing things to get you from zero to, let's just say, $10 million of earnings per revenue per year requires some fundamentals and some infrastructure and ways of thinking. But the thinking to go from 10 to 100 is going to be fundamentally different. And feel free to play around with those numbers a little bit.
Yep. Yep.
As a CIO who is taking a company from where it was founder led and there's a lot of innovation that has been accomplished to scale it to that 100, 200, $500 million company,
Mhm.
what do
Mhm.
you as a CIO look to when you come in? What are some of the things that you would say, hey, as a CIO, you need to be aware of these things? Are there any things that jump out to you that you might not have been aware of before that you now have as insight you can share with
Mm.
other CIOs?
This is exactly the struggle that we're in right now, right? Is taking Transcend from an emerging startup into a mid-sized company and now adding zeros to the bottom line. As much as I said IT, everything is done in IT is intimately involved in every aspect of the company. I don't have all the answers. And sometimes I think because IT is so intrinsic to what we do, you think maybe your opinion matters than other people's opinion. And you gotta surrender that. This is a collaboration. This is me working with my peers to make sure that we all understand it. The least successful times for me are when I'm insisting, outside of maybe compliance or things like that. So the best thing to do is to operate from a position of understanding. There is nothing greater that you need to do in a leadership role, from my view, than try to understand the people that you're working with and the people you're trying to support. That's what's going to take. I don't want to take 10 steps when one step works perfectly. I want to do this almost, I want to say, unconsciously. We are falling into the right next step, and that requires a really good understanding of business. That requires a really good understanding of the people that you're working with, so that you can be elegant in the solutions that you're building, and you're not throwing good money after bad. You're not building garbage that you got to work 24/7, 365 to try to support. And I don't have people complaining about how long it takes. I want these things to fall into place exactly when they need to. And to me, that's a sign of a well-run IT is they operate like that. There's no conversation that we have that doesn't have something about how is technology going to support this. So it is extremely challenging to do that. And to couple that with, I've got founders that are former IT people, and sometimes those are your best customers, and sometimes they're your worst customers, because they have their own opinion on how some of this stuff should go. And sometimes that knowledge is a little dated. Sometimes that knowledge is from other technology areas. You have to balance all of that. A lot of what I've done here has been educating people more so than anything else, and removing obstacles. But that's day one. That's what I walked in and told people, said, I am here to remove obstacles. And all of the good things that we've done have come from that.
That's awesome. So just a few more questions. So if you
Mhm.
could send a message back to your younger self when you're just stepping into IT leadership, is there a single
Mhm.
piece of advice that you'd stress above all else that say, pay attention to this?
Be courageous is probably the first one. Have the conversations. I think gone are the days of the geeky IT person that can sit in the corner and just do things. You have to be willing to get out there and work with people. It's not, you have to challenge this view that IT people are introverted and don't communicate well with others. Take those opportunities to connect with people, because that's what's done everything that I've been successful in. Because I took the time to understand what people really wanted to do, we were able to deliver solutions that matched for them. It's not healthy to sit in a corner and just and guess. Go and find the answer. And we have to say this sometimes to some of our younger people. And it gets back to maybe our chat GPT discussion. It's not going to have all the answers for you. Get your butt out of the seat and go talk to people, whether that's virtually. Don't be afraid of a phone call. Don't be afraid of interacting with people. I think that's the lesson that's really resonated with me over time. I'm definitely not the smartest guy in the room. I would like to think, though, that I'm the guy that can connect the pieces together in the most meaningful way. And don't be afraid of that. You don't have to be. It's okay to be humble. And instead of thinking about that competitively, think about how you can be of service in there. How can you facilitate these people to do their best work, to interact in a way that gets you to where you need to go? Because at the end of the day, there's really only one rule, and that's that we're going to be successful, and we'll do whatever it takes to get there.
Thank you for that. So last question, given all that you've achieved, what would you say really drives you, and what is one of your passions that you have outside of work?
I love being a dad. I spend a lot of time with my kids. I will say that I try very hard to not look at computer screens when I'm not at work, but I'm getting older now and I'm not necessarily as active as I was before. My background is in martial arts and Far Eastern philosophy and some of these softer things. That really motivates me more than anything else. For me, living a life that can integrate all of those pieces together. I have a couple of philosophies that I share with my team. Number one is service is the highest form of leadership. I believe that that is the type of org that I want to work in, is where you have people helping each other. I also believe that we don't take profit from the suffering of others. So we don't put people in bad situations and then use that to teach lessons or to derive entertainment from. That's one's super important to me, both things that happened to me in my childhood, but also the type of department that I want to run. And we want to build solutions that are crafted. Craftsmanship is super important to me. I don't want things that I don't feel proud of and I don't feel like fit. For me, the best thing is when you fit the square peg into the square hole and it just clicks and you look at that and there's that feeling of satisfaction you get when you go, oh, that's perfect. You took the right amount of steps. You missed by just this much. Like those feelings are the ones that really motivate me, both in my personal life and professionally. That's the type of world I want to live in.
I think it was Steve Jobs when he was asked why does he focus so much on the internal design when no one else is going to see it, and it came back something along the lines of "I'll see it." And I
Hmm.
think it was having that pride in knowing that you did the best with what you had and you gave it 100% effort. And from there, you can rest well at night knowing if someone were to take a look at one of your PCs or what you built all those years later, you're still associated with good quality work. And I feel that I saw from a lot of pride, a lot of that's how I want to be remembered. And I
Hmm.
think that is something that seems to be a silver line through all the conversations we've had, that
Hmm.
you want to have that level of integrity in who you are and how you stand and have that reflected in your team. So
Yep.
Brian, I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time and for sharing your insights. This has been incredibly invaluable, and just appreciate your authenticity and your willingness to jump in.
It was my pleasure. It's wonderful to get to step away for a little bit. And like we said, sit back and maybe think about the larger picture. So I'm grateful that you made this available for us and hopefully it sticks. And I would love to hear from people that are in that journey. And if there's ways that we can help them out, I'd love to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yep, of course. Thanks, Mike.